In the history of international relations, few ideas have been as audacious as former President Donald Trump's suggestion that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States. This proposition, while seemingly outlandish, has sparked considerable debate and speculation about its feasibility and potential ramifications. While the idea might appear far-fetched at first glance, a closer examination reveals a complex web of economic, geopolitical, and cultural factors that underpin this intriguing albeit controversial proposal. Trump's interest in this hypothetical merger is no secret. He has publicly expressed his admiration for Canada's vast natural resources, particularly its oil reserves, and has hinted at the economic benefits such a union could bring to the United States. However, the path to integrating two sovereign nations, each with its own distinct identity, history, and values, is fraught with challenges that extend far beyond mere economic considerations. The prospect of Canada becoming the 51st state raises profound questions about national sovereignty, cultural identity, and the very nature of the relationship between these two North American neighbors. It is a concept that has divided opinions on both sides of the border, igniting passionate arguments and fueling countless hours of debate among politicians, academics, and ordinary citizens alike. As we delve deeper into this complex issue, we will explore the potential benefits and drawbacks of such a merger, examining the economic, geopolitical, and cultural implications of what would undoubtedly be a momentous event in North American history. One of the primary drivers behind the idea of a US-Canada merger is undoubtedly the vast natural resource wealth that Canada possesses. From the sprawling forests of British Columbia to the oil sands of Alberta and the mineral-rich Canadian Shield, Canada is a treasure trove of natural resources that have long been coveted by its southern neighbor. The United States, being one of the world's largest consumers of natural resources, has always been keen on securing access to reliable and affordable sources of raw materials. Canada, with its abundant and diverse resource base, presents an enticing opportunity to achieve this goal. By merging with Canada, the U.S. could potentially gain unfettered access to these resources, reducing its dependence on other countries and bolstering its own economic and strategic security. Furthermore, a merger could potentially streamline trade and eliminate existing trade barriers between the two countries, facilitating the flow of goods and services across the border. This could lead to increased economic activity and job creation in both countries, although the distribution of these benefits would likely be uneven. However, it is important to acknowledge that the exploitation of natural resources, particularly in environmentally sensitive areas, is a contentious issue in Canada. Any attempt by the U.S. to gain control over Canadian resources would likely be met with strong resistance from environmental groups and indigenous communities who have long fought to protect their land and water. From a geopolitical standpoint, the creation of a unified North America would undoubtedly have profound implications for the global balance of power. With a combined population, economy, and military might that would dwarf any other country in the Western Hemisphere, a US-Canada merger would create a superpower unlike any the world has ever seen. This new North American colossus would wield immense influence on the world stage, potentially reshaping global alliances and redefining the geopolitical landscape. The United States, already a global superpower, would see its position further strengthened, while Canada, traditionally a middle power, would experience a significant elevation in its global stature. The merger could also lead to greater cooperation on issues such as defense, security, and foreign policy. A unified North America would be better positioned to address common threats, such as terrorism, climate change, and cyber warfare, and could potentially play a more assertive role in global affairs. However, this newfound power would not come without its challenges. Managing the complex relationships within a much larger and more diverse country would be a daunting task. Moreover, the merger could potentially provoke anxiety and suspicion from other countries, particularly in Latin America, where historical memories of U.S. interventionism run deep. Beyond the economic and geopolitical considerations, a US-Canada merger would necessitate the integration of two distinct societies, each with its own unique culture, values, and way of life. While the US and Canada share many cultural similarities, stemming from their shared history as former British colonies and their proximity to each other, there are also significant differences that should not be underestimated. Canada, for instance, prides itself on its multiculturalism and its social safety net, which provides universal healthcare and other social services. The United States, on the other hand, is often characterized by its individualism and its market-driven approach to healthcare and social welfare. Reconciling these different values and systems would be a complex and potentially contentious undertaking. Moreover, Canadians have a strong sense of national identity and are fiercely proud of their country's independence and distinct cultural heritage. Many Canadians would likely resist any attempt to subsume their national identity into that of the United States. The challenge of preserving Canadian culture and identity within a much larger and more dominant American culture would be significant. The labyrinth of laws. The legal and constitutional hurdles associated with a US-Canada merger are perhaps the most daunting of all. The US Constitution, while providing a framework for admitting new states, does not contemplate the absorption of an entire sovereign nation. Amending the Constitution is a complex and lengthy process, requiring supermajorities in both houses of Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the states. Given the political polarization in the United States, it is difficult to imagine such an amendment garnering the necessary support. Moreover, the legal systems of the two countries, while sharing common roots in English common law, have evolved along different paths, resulting in significant differences in areas such as criminal justice, property rights, and environmental regulations. Harmonizing these different legal systems would be a monumental task, requiring years of negotiations and compromises. Economic realities. While the prospect of accessing Canada's vast natural resources might seem economically appealing, the economic realities of a merger are far more complex. Integrating two economies of such different sizes and structures would pose significant challenges. Canada's economy, while robust, is significantly smaller than that of the United States. A merger would likely result in the Canadian economy becoming increasingly integrated into the US economy, potentially leading to job losses in certain sectors and a decline in Canadian economic autonomy. Furthermore, there are significant disparities in the cost of living, wages, and social safety nets between the two countries. These disparities would need to be addressed to prevent a mass exodus of Canadians seeking better economic opportunities in the United States. A question of consent. Perhaps the most fundamental question surrounding the idea of a US-Canada merger is whether such a union would be desirable or even acceptable to the people of both countries. Public opinion polls on the issue have consistently shown little appetite for a merger on either side of the border. Most Canadians value their independence and see their country as distinct from the United States, while most Americans are either indifferent or opposed to the idea of absorbing their northern neighbor. Any attempt to force a merger upon an unwilling population would be met with fierce resistance and could potentially destabilize the region. A successful merger, if it were to occur, would require the overwhelming consent and support of the people of both countries. The long road ahead. The prospect of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States remains a distant and improbable scenario. The economic, geopolitical, cultural, legal, and most importantly, the popular support for such a merger simply does not exist. However, the very fact that this idea continues to be discussed, albeit often in a tongue-in-cheek manner, highlights the complex and evolving relationship between these two North American neighbors. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the lines between nations may continue to blur, and the possibility of closer political and economic integration cannot be entirely ruled out. For now, however, Canada and the United States will continue to navigate their relationship as two distinct sovereign nations, each with its own unique identity, values, and aspirations. The future of North America, whether it involves closer cooperation or continued separation, remains to be written.